Hey there, it's Irene Lyon. Welcome to this video and to this YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. This is where we talk about all things healing, trauma, nervous system health, and neuroplasticity. And I want to share a real story with you today. And I will admit, I've been wanting to tell this story for well over a year now because the events that occurred happened back in 2017, September. So right now it's January 2019, so well over a year and a bit ago. And I was traveling in Europe with my husband, Seth. We were having some time off. It was very nice. We were in Europe, and at the time of this story, we were in Rome. So we were in Italy. And it's a perfect example of why we need to understand what kids need. And I will admit, we get a lot of questions in my Facebook group, Healthy Nervous System Revolution. If you're not part of this online community, totally free, head over there. I will link it below. But there's questions about, how do we be with kids when they're having tantrums? How do we parent children when there's been trauma? There's so many questions, and they're all very valid because we've gotten so far away from really understanding what kids, what babies, what in utero life should be like. And so this story kind of sets this up. It was also spurred in my memory because just this week I posted a wonderful clip that I will post below. It's a YouTube video of one of my favorite mentors, online mentors and authors, Gabor Maté, talking about the importance of the first 3 years of life. And again, I will post another vlog of mine called What It Takes to Create a Healthy Human just below. But there are critical things going on in the first 3 years of life that allow us to have what we call a regulated nervous system, where we learn early on how to self-soothe and how to self-regulate. And when we get that early upbringing, we have the potential to basically realize really good health. And so this story, it will give you an idea of where I find sometimes we miss what children really need. So we were traveling in Rome. We were touring Rome, and we were visiting that one day Palatine Hill and the Colosseum. They're side by side, kind of ancient Rome, the ancient Roman area of Rome. And we had two different tours that day. One was of Palatine Hill, and we had a wonderful tour guide by the name of David. I'll actually see if I can post his information below because he was amazing. Roman historian, grew up in that town, wonderful guy, and he was so animated. And then the second tour we had in the Colosseum, and the woman that did the tour wasn't so animated, our second tour in the Colosseum. I'll tell you why this is an important part. So there was a family, not my family, I was just there with Seth. There was a family with a small child. He was probably about 5 years old. I'm guessing maybe 4.5, 5. And mom was there, grandma was there, grandpa was there. It was pretty clear that that was the dynamic. And I'm like, wow, this kid's got a big day ahead of him. And he was doing great the first part of the tour, which was close to 2.5 hours. It was long and it was warm. And what was so interesting was David, the tour guide, kept interacting with him. And my sense is because he's a practiced tour guide, he knows that if children are not connected with in some way, they'll freak out. Because let's face it, does a 5-year-old want to be visiting the Roman ruins, learning about all of the things that went on back then? No. Unless the tour guide can somehow bring him into the story, which he did. And so this little kid was, he was having a good time. And so we finished that tour, great tour. We then went and had a break at the tour guide office, like where they pick you up. And then we had to move back to the Colosseum with this group to find our next tour guide. And this little kid started to have a tantrum, what we would call a tantrum, which, by the way, is just a child being overwhelmed, tired, and needing to let go of steam. Whether they need a rest, maybe they're hungry, they just don't want to keep doing what they're doing. And if at that age, you can't communicate properly your emotions, your sensations. So what do when the ocean inside of you is brewing and brewing into a storm? You freak out. You throw what we call a tantrum. Sadly, there was some comedy in this. The grandpa did the old tactic of spanking him, which, this happens to try to smarten him up. Didn't work. He tried to run away, grabs him, and then as he grabs him, the little kid smacks grandpa, as he should. If someone hits you, your desire when you're that young is to hit them back. So that occurred, meltdown happened, but we had to go to the tour. So we walked down, this long road, tons of people, and the little guy calms down, and I look, and of course what had happened is he was given an iPad to look at. So he got zoned into that, which might have been an okay thing to do, because they wanted to see the Colosseum. So we get into the Colosseum, and we have to wait again for nearly 40 minutes for our tour guide to show up, because we're just waiting for other groups to join. So what was our smaller group is now becoming a bigger group. We're waiting for more people, but we are having to sit in this area that's filled with these rocks and these pebbles. And this little guy was not happy. So he starts to pick the rocks up and throw them to his mother and grandparents, and they did not like that. So of course they tried to smarten him up. They tried to sit him in his seat, his stroller. Of course, he didn't want that. They tried to reason with him. You cannot reason with a 5-year-old when they're in high fight-flight energy. So his nervous system was ramped up, tired. I was tired, and I'm an adult and regulated. And I could see this spinning into nowhere. And the last thing I wanted to see was this little poor guy getting smacked and spanked, when really he shouldn't be there at this point. Anyway, I went into my survival mode, which was to connect with him. So what I did is I instantly sat down on the rocks, and I started to pick them up and look at them, which is what he was doing. He was picking them up, but rather than looking at them, throwing them to get attention. He looks at me, sees me, I see that he sees me. I say, hey, what if we could find 10 rocks that look like squares, or look like, I don't even know what I said, triangles or circles? I gave him a task. I engaged with him. I played with him. And so we found rocks, and we started piling them up and piling them up. Like, okay, how big can we pile this up? And he was so happy that someone was playing with him and engaging with him at his brain level, right? He doesn't give a shit about the Colosseum and Roman history. He just wants to play with those rocks, and nobody would play with him. So here I am playing with him. He builds this beautiful mound, part of nervous system work and part of regulating our system when we are overwhelmed. Sometimes we have to get big energy out. And the energy that was in this little kid's physiology was frustration and anger. He was hit earlier. He tried to hit back. That didn't work. He's got all this energy, and I got him to look at this mound. I'm like, what do you want to do with it? And he looks at me with these big eyes, and he's like, takes his hand and he just smashes it. And I applauded. I was like, that's awesome. So we had this little interaction, and I was just stalling. And so we kept doing this. We built another circle. The tour guide came, thank God. And his mom looks at me and she goes, wow, you must be a teacher. You're so good with kids. It took everything in my might to just be gracious and say something like that. So I'm telling this story because, and there's another part to it. I'm telling this story because we get so frustrated sometimes when these little bursts come out, and often the remedy isn't that difficult. What I think is unfortunate is that parents will have children and they don't understand what it means to be adult, to stay still, to behave. They're meant to play. Children are meant to play. That's how they learn. That's how they connect. what I did was not rocket science. We took what was there. I got a little dirty, got a little dusty, but it mitigated another big tantrum and him being basically physically abused again. So we went along for the rest of the tour. It was beautiful. And halfway down, he saw my husband, because he knew that my husband Seth was with me. He pulled on his pant. He's like, "Where's your girlfriend? Where is she?" And I knew that I actually had to distance myself from this little guy throughout the thing, because he would have just clung to me, because I was one of the only people most likely in that 6-hour period that paid him any attention. And so, he was looking for that. And all I can say for anyone here who has access to children, who is with children, whether you're their grandchildren, whether they're friends' kids, whether they're your own kids, whether it's a little person you see that's having a meltdown at the grocery store, if you can take a moment to make eye contact and just be fun with them and play with them, it will make all the difference in the world. So the next thing I want to refer you to is actually not something that I'm going to talk about. It's a clip from Gabor Maté. He is a Vancouver-based physician, author, world known for his writings, especially books called When the Body Said No, Scattered Minds, and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. But he also has co-written some books on helping rear healthy children. And he said this in this video that I've posted below. Be sure to watch it. It's short. It's like 10 minutes. He said this: "The real relationship doesn't depend on words." What he means by that is that when you're that little, especially under the age of 5 and especially under the age of 3, those little beings cannot communicate in intellectual higher brain function. They feel, they sense, they are raw little human animals. And we actually have to meet them at that level. I don't mean be stupid and dumbed down, but they're feeling energy, and we need to feel their energy. The word here is attunement. We need to attune to them, connect with them, and be with them, and actually get down onto the ground with them. We're big. We're bigger than them. It's like we're like monsters to them in some strange ways. If you think about that, if someone's having a little bit of a meltdown, you got to get down to their level. And by level, I also mean where they are height-wise. That is why this story of this lovely little kid, thankfully he spoke English. I think he was from the States. I got down onto the ground, and that showed him that I cared. And it showed him that I was willing to give him my time and help him process his frustration. So I didn't sit there and say, "Hey, little dude, you're so angry and frustrated. What does that feel like?" That doesn't work. Or we can't be, "Oh, I see, you're just so upset. That must be really difficult." That really soft, kind, in a state like that, that's not matching his nervous system physiology. He has energy, he's frustrated, he hasn't played, he's been watching these tours all day long. He just needs someone to be like, "Hey, let's play with these rocks." And he gave us the hint because he started to pick them up. And he didn't know what to do with them, and nobody was there to be with him, so he was trying to get attention by throwing them. So all in all, I really wanted to share this story because, as simple as it might seem, and it's really simple, often these simple pieces go missing. And they go missing because parents just might not know. Perhaps they weren't connected to that way when they were little. Maybe nobody played with them. Maybe just they were left alone to play, or maybe they weren't allowed to play. They had to be, little disciplined children to the point where they couldn't be rambunctious. And then you have this little guy who's still fresh in his nervous system apprenticeship, learning how to be a human. And I will admit, he shifted and changed so quickly, which is a good sign. It shows that somewhere within that family system, something good is happening, because there'll be situations where I try to connect with little people like that just whenever I'm around and seeing that they're unwell, and I'll try to smile or kind of give a little, face or a little wave, and they will instantly look away. they'll get angry, they'll be scared. That's sad to me, because that shows that that little one is shut down and is afraid of people and of the environment. Whereas this little dude in Italy, he was just waiting and just thirsty for human connection. So whenever you can offer that kind of connection to a child, please do give it to them, whether it's your own, other kids that you come into contact with. They want our attention, and they want us to be with them in a curious, fun, and playful way. That is how human beings develop. It's how other mammals develop. They play, but they play in the close connection with the parental figures there, watching over them to make sure that they're doing, that they're not getting into trouble, that they're not getting hurt. It doesn't mean stopping a child from doing something, but just that close presence. And that's what Gabor Maté talks about in that video that I've linked below. All right, I will leave it at that. Thank you for listening to my ancient Rome story with this little guy from I'm not so sure where, who was pretty pissed off that he had to go through this day-long tour with all of us old people. I hope that, you take in this information and realize that it's actually pretty simple when we know what to look for. All right, take good care, everybody. We will see you next time.